What's up everybody, my name is Michael Burrell, and in this video I'm going to be going over all of the tools in the Adobe Illustrator Pathfinders palette. That's all the shape modes and all the Pathfinder modes. So let's get started. First things first, for this demonstration I included a practice file that you can download. So go ahead and get that before we get started. Alright, now that you have the practice file, what I have here is a series of artboards open, all showing the same thing. It's all this green circle, red and blue square in front. And why I did this is so we can look at each of the shape modes one by one and see how these Pathfinder tools work. So, if you don't see it already, you can go to Window and choose Pathfinder. All right, if you already have it, it'll be here. I'm going to pull mine out so you can see it. And I set this up in a way that hopefully you'll be able to follow along easy enough. So the first thing we're going to do is grab just these two. So the Pathfinder tools work based on what you have selected. So I grab the first two in, say, box number 1, the top left box, and I'm going to hit the corresponding shape for that, which is the Unite tool. So if I hit Unite, I now get a single shape that is united between those two. All right, so the square and the circle have become one shape. They kept the color and the stroke of whichever was in front. All right. Next up, next one over, I'm going to select both of those. I'm going to choose minus front, which is our second shape mode. Minus front will take the front and it will knock it away from the back shape. So it literally punches a hole, the shape of the front shape, into the back shape. Right? So this now stroke continues there. It just cut that area away, which is really useful if you want to try to fit something perfectly. This is one that I use constantly. Number 3 in our shape modes is Intersect. What this is going to do is it's going to delete everything except for where those two shapes overlap. Okay? So all you have left is what was an intersection. And the opposite of that would be shape mode number 4, which is the exclude option. Okay? So now I'm going to hit exclude, the fourth option, and that removes what overlapped, but not what didn't. Right? So these 4 shape modes, all starting with the same shapes at the beginning, gave us 4 very different results. So that explains our shape modes. Now we're going to move on to our Pathfinders. The Pathfinders, or that second set of tools, are a little bit more complicated, but I'm going to break down why you would use each one or what those subtle differences are. All right. First thing, I'm going to select them. I have my first 2 selected, bottom left. I'm going to go over to my bottom left Pathfinder, which is my divide mode, and I'm going to hit divide. Now, when you use the Pathfinders, it creates compound shapes, or these shapes that are kind of joined together. So the first thing you have to do on any of them is if you grab this, you realize that they're all grouped now. Just come in, right-click, and ungroup, or you can do Command-Shift-G and ungroup them. Okay? But now that I've ungrouped it, I can move this, and I realize that I now have 3 separate shapes. So where divide took every time something overlapped, and it made a separate shape out of it. Okay? So that's where divide comes in. Now, for the next 2, I'm going to make a little bit of a change. I'm going to select both of these circles for these next 2, and I'm going to use my eyedropper tool, and I'm going to make them the same color and the same fill as each other, and you'll see why in a minute. The first one, actually my second one in, I should say. The second one, I'm going to select both of these, and I'll click the second one in, which is our trim mode. And by clicking trim, it ignores the stroke. Once again, I can ungroup these. And what it's done is it's created 2 separate shapes, ignoring the stroke, similar to divide, but instead of taking the separate piece out, it just took what was visibly changed where the overlap was. Okay. Now our next one is merge. Okay. And on 2 shapes that have different fill colors, it's going to appear to have done the exact same thing as this. You won't see a difference. However, if you have the same fill color and you hit merge, you will see a difference. And that difference being that when I hit ungroup, or I can see there is no option to ungroup, this is actually just one shape similar to our unite option. Okay, so this one depends on the color you're using. If you are using a bunch of shapes with similar fill colors and you want everything with the same fill to become one shape, this would be the tool to use. If you want them to not become the same shape and they have the same fill color, you can use trim. Okay. All right. Moving on to the fourth of our Pathfinders. This one is crop. Selected those two shapes, hit crop. This is similar to an intersect. All you wind up with is that area where the two shapes overlapped. Next two over is outline. Now, outline's a little weird. When you first click it, you're going to get a lot of these strange kind of shapes and whatnot. So the first thing I recommend doing is just putting a stroke on your shape. Okay? And now, once you up that stroke, I can right-click, ungroup, and every time a line touched another, it got broken into separate pieces. So every one of these spots became its own piece. All right, so that's what outline mode does, is it actually looks at the lines individually. And you can do some really interesting things with that, especially with logos and text. Lastly, we have minus back. All right, and that's just the opposite of what minus front did. It's subtracted from the back. The last thing I would like to say on any of these is that typically when I work with these, every time I do any one of our Pathfinders, I hold Option while doing it. Okay, and the reason I do this is you may see the same looking result for the most part. So that was Unite. But what's nice is I can now double click on this shape, select once now that I'm in group isolation mode, and make adjustments to it. What's done down here, what we did earlier, is permanent. This is a temporary change. We can actually still make changes. This is a live change, right? So this is a non-destructive edit, we would say in Photoshop. So again, if I undo this, same thing goes for any of these. If I want to add, even if it's minus front, I hold Option and I hit minus front. I've now cut that away, but it's still here. And if I double click on it, I can move around and change where that edit has occurred. And this is a really useful way to save yourself some time. So I always recommend holding Option. One last little bit of bonus content there. Okay, so that's a pro tip. Always use Option when you're using these. It's just a good habit to get into, and it'll free up a lot of options down the road. All right, that wraps up the Pathfinder palettes for this video. Hopefully this whole palette makes a bit more sense to you than it did before. I know this confuses some people in the beginning, but once you begin working into it, it's not that complicated. And I will see you in the next video.